So make sure you have those test tones ready to go, and once again, they are free to download. So with those test tones, you're going to be able to analyze, and you're going to need some equipment to do this, and this is where the investment's going to come in. You're going to need an oscilloscope, which is going to show you the waveforms. You're also going to need an RTA, which will show you the frequency response. You'll need to be able to use the RTA to measure both the signal coming into the speaker or out of the amplifier head unit, and you're also going to be able to use the RTA to acoustically listen to what's happening in the vehicle. And that's also extremely important, because when you're using a microphone, you're going to pick up everything, including the acoustics of the vehicle, the frequency response of the speakers, as well as the pink noise coming out. So a microphone like this from Dayton Audio, which is Parts Express, sets you back, I think, about $110 is all for this microphone. And of course, you're going to need a nice, decent cable to run from that to some type of input device. And I didn't happen to bring that down, but I use a little mixer called a Moana, which is available on Amazon.com for about 150 bucks. There's also the Scarlett Focusrite. They do pretty much the same thing. They're a little bit more expensive. That allows you to get the signal from this microphone, or using another unconventional way, which we'll talk about, to measure the signal coming out of the amplifier directly into an RTA. So you know the signal you have to start with. Then once you get that signal playing in the vehicle, you can use the RTA to analyze the acoustic response. So I'll tell you what, I mean, you may think you got a flat response, but it's probably not going to be. And with the RTA, you can very quickly decipher where the frequencies are too high or too low in output level and kind of balance that sound out. And remember, we're not looking for a perfectly flat frequency response. Way back in the Iasca days, they wanted a perfect level flat RTA response from your speakers, which is nice and all. That means it's doing exactly what the music was intended to sound like, but it really sounds kind of dry and sterile. It's not exciting. It's not fun. It doesn't have a lot of drive, doesn't have a lot of bass. And I don't know about you, if I'm going to spend a couple grand on a car audio system, I want to feel the music, I want it loud, and I want to make sure it sounds good. So you'll also be able to determine with the RTA, do I need anything to go in between the source, which might be the factory radio or the factory amplifier or even an aftermarket radio? Do I need to put anything between those pieces that's going to help the sound? Now, there's a couple things in car audio you need to spend some money on that you're not going to physically see, but they're going to help you acoustically. And a lot of times these simple devices will outweigh their cost, even though they look expensive. So a lot of times you might need something called a line output converter. The line output converter, we've talked in detail about those before, is where we take the line output from the factory radio or amplifier, we isolate it from ground, and we drop the signal down to a lower level. That's a conventional line output converter called an LOC, otherwise known as a high to low level converter. That's kind of the slang term for it, because it's exactly what it does. It takes a 25 watt speaker level output and turns it into 10 volts of signal. It's not wattage anymore because we've stripped almost all the current out of it. But do you need a simple interface? With our amplifiers, we've tried to make it so you don't need any type of line output converter unless you've got a smart radio and it's going to require some type of load. And we don't want to get into that too deep tonight, because that's something you're just going to have to determine. Pretty much anything after about 2015, it's always a good idea to have some type of load on the output of that radio, especially the new ones. We started out with 60 ohm loads and we went to 25 ohm loads. Now some of these units are requiring as low as 10 ohms to level that system out to make sure that you get a good frequency response out of it. But another type of LOC is a summing device. So by using the RTA, you're going to figure out, hey, do I have a full range signal anywhere, or is it a high pass? Is it low pass? Is it a band pass signal? Do I need to combine any of these signals together, and can I combine them together? Is going to be another question you ask. So, the summing devices here again are not going to be seen. All they're going to do is allow you to sum the output from, say, a set of dash speakers and a set of small door speakers and maybe a set of mid-bass drivers in the doors and even a subwoofer. With a summing device, you can take all 4 pair of those outputs and sum them into one full range signal. And you'll need an RTA to decide if that's possible. You can't use the speaker or the microphone and just listen to the speaker, because the speaker's not going to reproduce a full range sound. They're physically incapable of doing a full spectrum. That's why we've got tweeters, we have mid-ranges, we have mid-bass, we have woofers, we have subwoofers, because each speaker specializes in a band of frequencies. but you may be sending it a full range frequency. You're only going to hear that band of frequencies out of it. So that's a pretty important piece to understand, is when you need a summing device. Now, the other thing that's become very important lately is something called an interface. Interface is a type of line output converter, but it doesn't generally deal with speaker level. So an interface plugs in the signal between the factory source unit, I'm not going to call it the radio, but whatever's in the dash, and the amplifier. So you'll need an interface if you've got a factory radio that has a separate amplifier, especially, for an example, the Chrysler vehicles, and I know this pretty well because I've had several of them. The Chryslers with the Beat system or the Alpine system, they absolutely require an interface. Now, I tend to use a lot of the Amp Pro pieces. They do a pretty good job. They're not always cheap. I mean, when the Most 2 system came out, the interface for that I think was about $800, but it was absolutely essential to getting good quality sound. So you're dumping a ton of coin into something you're going to hide behind the dash or in the back of the vehicle that you're never going to see, but it is absolutely essential to grab a full range signal. So in the Chryslers, you've got a high pass output for the dash speakers, you've got a low pass output for the door speakers, and you have a subwoofer output. All the crossovers are done internally within the amplifier. And something else interesting with the Chrysler, not only the Chrysler, but they send a 2-channel fixed audio signal from the source unit to the amplifier. It's fixed. It is analog, and it's only 2 channels. What does that mean? If I tap into that signal conventionally with a line output converter or just connect RCAs and go into an amplifier, you have no control over volume, you have no control over tone, you have no control over balance or fader. All that is done digitally in the amplifier. On those vehicles, it is absolutely, required that you have a type of interface. Same thing with the B&O systems in the Fords. I worked on a 2022 Raptor the other day, and we had to use an Amp Pro piece to completely remove the factory amplifier and take it out of the system. Once again, that vehicle, I think it had 17 speakers in it. Everything was crossed over. It was really bizarre because some of the speakers, the little pillars on the front and the pillars on the tweeters and then the headrest were all powered off the radio in the dash, and then everything else came off the amplifier in the back. So you have to know where to grab signal, which is another area where it's good to do a little research, find out where the factory amplifier is, if there is one, and a lot of the people out there are real nice. They'll actually tell you, yes, you need an interface if you're going to do this, or no, just a line output converter. Generally, if you're just adding bass to a system, you can get by without any type of interface. Just take the signal out of the subwoofer and feed it directly into the RCA inputs of any of our amplifiers, the LX, the CX, because they're going to handle up to 400 watts, which is equivalent to 40 volts, right into the RCA input.